what's the matter with the doctor?
I don't know. When the lights went out, he just seemed to faint.
Hey, come on, doctor. Wakey, wakey. It's all over now.
What did you say, my boy? It's all over. That's what you said. No. But it isn't all over. It's far from being all over.
What are you talking about?
I must get back to the TARDIS. Immediately.
All right, Doctor.
Hello and welcome to Who Watches Who, a Doctor Who podcast with me, Matthew, and as always, I am joined with...
Hello, I'm Scott.
Wow, what a huge wait that was for him to say his name. It's worth it every time. It's worth it every single time. This week, we are concluding our look at the 10th planet with parts 3 and 4. Regeneration is very much in the air, as we have just discovered Jodie is regenerating next week. So this was perfectly timed, and maybe Mondas is even in it.
Yeah.
Maybe Mondas is even in it, which would make this even fucking better timed. You know?
Go and listen to our trailer reaction, which we uploaded a couple of days ago to get the gist. Which I'm laughing because we just filmed it to give away our secret. We just filmed our trailer reaction.
No, Scott, these are recorded live and in person. They're never recorded weeks in advance. We're not that professional. We don't have too much to talk about before we start jumping into these episodes, but if you did miss our episode last week, I recommend listening to that before listening to this one. It is called The First Cybermen, and that is looking at episodes 1 and 2 of this story. This episode is looking at parts 3 and 4. See, they're like nice little two-parters that you can just listen to and be like, ooh, I know so much about the episode now. But Scott was saying he's got a little bit of information before we jump into part 3, so let's have at it.
If you remember the opening scene, one of the opening scenes of episode 1, where the Doctor, Ben and Polly are just outside in the snow, you remember that the Doctor wasn't played by William Hartnell in that scene because he was on holiday. This episode, the Doctor was once again played by the guy who played the Doctor in that episode, Gordon Craig, because Hartnell suffered from bronchitis this week. Episode 3 was planned to have the Doctor become weaker and sleeping in the bunk room, so we just made him collapse earlier in the opening scene and gave the Doctor's lines to Ben and Polly and a few other characters. And the Doctor was supposed to return in the climax, but because William Hartnell was sick, he couldn't do it this week. Which is very weird to watch unfold in this episode.
It is. It's very much... This episode doesn't feel like Doctor Who. This episode just feels like a sci-fi TV film. Like, it's it's not a terrible episode. I was quite entertained watching this episode, but if it was
it's a solid episode.
If it was just on TV and it wasn't, like, if I was channel flicking without reading and this came on, I'd be like, oh, this is some weird black and white sci-fi thing from the 60s. I would never go, this is Doctor Who, because it's like, it's so separate from Doctor Who feeling.
With this story in general, you can really tell that they tried to include the Doctor less, because obviously William Hartnell was ill and there's no telling when he would not be available. So when last minute rewrites needed to happen, like this episode, it could easily be rewritten around him. He wasn't going to be in the episode that much. He was going to basically sleep for the entire episode, basically. Yeah. So I mean, it works out well in its favor.
To be fair, that's what he does in every episode. Like,
But yeah, there was a real behind-the-scenes concern that William Hartnell would not return for episode 4. So thankfully, he did return and shoot his regeneration scene, which is iconic now.
Yes, and unfortunately now also lost to time, as it is
the regeneration scene isn't lost to time because we have surviving footage of that scene, but the whole episode is obviously lost to time. Yeah.
But anyway, shall we jump into episode 3 of the 10th planet?
No.
Oh, damn. Okay, well, thanks very much for listening to this week's episode. We'll see you next week.
Look, you just keep your mind on making coffee, will you? I'm sorry, that was rude. You must be scared stiff with all that's happening.
I am rather.
Well, try not to worry about it.
If Mondas turns into a sun and pours out deadly radiation, how much will it affect us?
Oh, I don't know. It may not affect us at all.
That's not what you said just now.
I know, but I'm not at all certain what would happen.
But what could happen?
Well, the radiation could affect us, and there'd be a certain loss of life, and the vegetation would, well, suffer badly for many years.
And you're prepared to just let this happen?
Well, what can I do? Cutler holds all the cards.
13 minutes to countdown, Dr. Barton.
Right.
Can't we wait? Fight off the Cybermen until Mondas is destroyed. It would probably mean the end of Cutler's son, but that's one life against millions.
Yes, but what can I do? If I don't follow the General's orders, he's bound to, well, carry on his own without me. You know, he's a very ruthless man.
Can't we pretend to follow his orders, but in fact make sure the rocket doesn't go off?
So our episode begins basically where our last episode ended. Although I don't really remember how our last episode ended. Oh yes, with the formation of the ships appearing. Not too much actually happens with that immediately. They kind of just like, well, they're there, I guess. We'll just ignore that and move on. As the Doctor has a heart attack and collapses. We only, of course, see the back of his head, as you said. It is not William Hartnell. Although I think if you didn't tell me that, I wouldn't have known. I don't think I would have been able to tell that that's not William Hartnell.
I mean, he spends the entire episode sleeping on his front, hiding his face.
Yeah,
so.
yeah.
I would think you're smart enough to figure out, oh yeah, that's probably why.
No,
he's
but
not in this episode.
like William Hartnell spent so many episodes lying down asleep. I wouldn't have thought it out of the ordinary. I would have been like, this tracks for everything I know about Hartnell's era. All the episodes I've seen, this fits the pattern, you know.
One thing about the opening of this episode, of course, Jerry Davis is credited, but his name is spelt wrong in the opening credits. Same as Kit Pedler in episode 1.
Did they fix it in the animated version?
I think they fixed it. I think they fixed it in the actual edit of the next episode, and like the existing episode probably, but because they fixed Kit Pedler's name after the first episode. It's very strange, but yeah.
Sometimes things happen. But we also get a phone call between the General Man and his son. If you remember from last week, his son is being sent up on a mission to save those guys that are already dead, basically dooming himself to die. And the General wasn't too happy about that. And he's chatting with his son, and they're talking about sci-fi nonsense, like, how's your rocket ship going? Is it going well? That's nice. Are you winning, son? As they're chatting. Not too much is gained from this, but it does.
Yeah.
The son, I was glad the son was an actual character in this bit, because obviously he wasn't a character in episodes 1 and 2, and we were just kind of meant to believe that he existed. Him being a character in this, for me, gave it a bit more stakes, because I could see and hear him, even if he is a bit of a blank slate cardboard man, you know. It lets me buy into the captain's manic fucking, like, I am going to kill everybody behavior that he develops later on much better.
Yeah, that's my main issue, is he's just a bland character, and we don't really have too much chemistry. I presume you won't get much chemistry from two people talking to a screen, basically, but, you know, I think a bit more writing would have been a bit better, just, like, make him aware of, like, a personal connection. It doesn't feel like we're that personal. It feels like a casual conversation almost. Yeah. It's very strange.
Although I feel like the dad's trying to pretend like he's not talking to his son. There's like this bit of dialogue where the guy's like, you know, how you doing up there, son? And then he like kind of like is like, oh fuck, I don't know how to say that. And then the son's like, that voice sounds familiar, but I don't know if they ever like explicitly go like, hey, it's your dad talking here. I hope you're okay. I think it's kept. He's like, he's trying to maintain this like air of professionality to not get across to his son that he's like fucking like, you're gonna die.
Yeah.
We then get a scene with Ben and Polly putting the Doctor to bed, being like, oh, he's so sleepy, what an old man, and then they leave, and we get a very well acted scene with Ben and the General basically just shouting at each other. It's like Ben's lines of dialogue are for sure what the Doctor was going to say, but instead it's just, you know, Ben saying them instead. And he's like, the Doctor said this to me off screen when you weren't looking, and he's yelling. But the guy playing Ben is giving a great performance.
Yeah, I think this is probably his best performance because he's actually given stuff to say, because also it's meant for the Doctor, the big hero of the piece, and the companions are always meant to be the people who ask questions of the Doctor.
Yeah.
So, of course, this is a moment where you finally get something.
Good
lines.
He gets something.
Something, yeah. He's not making coffee in this episode, at least.
Yeah, we'll get to that. But after that, the General's like, fuck it, I'm gonna launch some Z-bombs. Which, interestingly, he doesn't call them Z-bombs, does he? He calls them Z-bombs. It's a very Americanized way of saying that. But he gets on the phone call to the Europe dude that's apparently in charge of, I guess, Europe. And he's like, this conversation annoys the fuck out of me because it makes, like, no sense.
Yeah.
Because he's chatting with the dude, and the guy's like, if you launch those bombs, it would be an utter destruction for everybody. Under no circumstances can you launch those bombs. We need to have a full, like, fucking summit, and everybody needs to talk about it. And then the General goes, all right. But, right, you see, when dealing with these Cybermen, can I do what I like? And the guy goes, oh, yeah, no bother. Do it, like, any means necessary. Do what you like. And then the General hangs up, and he's like, he said I could use the Z-bombs. You know, even though he did explicitly say don't, the last thing he said was do what you like. It's the dumbest fucking conversation.
I presume this scene is supposed to just get across what this General guy just does what he pleases.
He's taking
like,
power into his own hands, basically. Yeah. But it was a silly scene. It literally...
and it lasts like 3 minutes.
It does. It's a long conversation. We then get more shouting between Ben and the General. Again, Ben filling in the spot of the Doctor, talking about how, you know, the Z-bombs would destroy all life on Earth. Even if they were to attack Mondas, they'd still basically kill, like, everybody. If not, like, half the planet, I think it is, or something like that. And there's also this weird logic that happens in this episode that to me doesn't feel Doctor Who. Actually, it feels very anti-Doctor Who. It comes up a bit later. I don't think they mention it here, but it could even be a line Polly says, where she says it's one life talking about the General versus millions, and that they should just kill the General's son. And I was like, is that Doctor Who morals? Just fuck that one dude, you know? It felt very strange to me, but I guess they were okay with killing that one dude. At least Polly was.
You know, Polly just loves killing people. She's the prototype of the 13th Doctor. That's where the 13th Doctor gets it from, you know?
Ben goes to check on the Doctor but can't wake him up as the General's moving ahead with the launching of the Z-bomb, and we get some guys in radiation suits walking around talking really about nothing in particular. The issue that I have with a lot of this episode, because I really enjoyed this episode. I think the performances are strong. I like it when everyone's shouting at each other. It's just like all the stuff they're talking about between scenes of shouting at each other is gibberish. It doesn't matter. Like, they're just talking about kind of sci-fi nonsense here, and then being like, boy, I sure hope that this bomb goes off and I save my son. I'm really worried about him. Like...
Yeah, it's strange because most TV shows will be like, okay, we have to launch this rocket, and the next scene is them launching the rocket, whereas Doctor Who is just like, okay, we're gonna launch. Explain how rockets are launched.
Yeah, we're gonna launch this rocket.
Very strange.
Okay, we're gonna talk about launching the rocket. We're gonna start building the rocket, and by the end of the episode, you bet your ass we'll have blueprints to launch that rocket. Ben tries unlocking a door with a screwdriver because he is, of course, the Doctor in this episode. And then he's like, oh, they don't make locks like this in 1960, whatever, the fancy 1980s lock. And instead, he decides to diehard it by climbing into the huge fucking vents in this facility. They are very large.
Yeah. So Doctor Who would be known for his cliche of having characters climb through vents. We saw it in the Sea Devils where Joe Grant climbs through a vent. But this is the first time they actually climb through a vent in Doctor Who. So yeah, that's history made in Doctor Who in 2 ways. Actually 3 ways. First time we see the Cyberman, first vent climb, and the Regeneration.
Yep, 3 ways. Crazy. So the episode continues and we get some more science talk, and then the lead scientist guy is really sexist for a while towards Polly, where he's like, shut up and make me coffee. Oh, I'm sorry for snapping at you, but let's have a chat about science. And she's like, well, what's going on? And he's like, oh, you needn't worry your head about any of that stuff, just keep making these coffees.
Yeah, of course, she's a woman. She wouldn't understand what's going on in the first place. She's just a girl,
It's fucking yikes. It's real yikes.
I can remember the same thing happening in the Tomb of the Cybermen, where Victoria was basically just left to make a cup of tea, and that's all she really did, and she fell asleep.
Yeah.
That's great.
What I did like about the scene though is after they talk, after all the sexism bits happen, she is actually asking him like, genuine questions to prove she does understand what's going on. She's like, what if Mondas gets destroyed? What happens if, they nuke us? What's going to happen to the population? She's doing the companion thing of asking questions, but they're relevant questions, many of which the scientist doesn't have answers to, and he's like, there's nothing I can do because fucking Captain General there wants to launch the missile, so we're going to launch the missile. And Polly's like, maybe we could team up and help stop this missile launch, which it's a fun little thing, him trying to like work with the general. Like, she's like, what if we just slow down the general's plans? What if we do what he's asking of us but don't quite do it? And it doesn't really work out for them, but
that's basically the plot of the whole episode you just discussed. It's like that's basically all that happens left. It's a very uneventful episode.
It is a surprisingly very uneventful episode. We find out that the Cybermen are very close to landing, and so they're like, well, we're going to deal with them the way we dealt with them last time and just shoot them while hiding and then steal all their weapons. We cut to Ben and Polly and the scientist in the quarters where the doctor is definitely there and he's definitely asleep. Don't worry, he's just off camera. And they're talking about a plan. And this is one of my favorite classic Who tropes, where they get out a piece of paper and they start writing down like science, quote unquote. And we see the scientist guy is like, you go through this vent and there's a thing here and it's a really shitty drawing, and then he's like, and you're looking for this thing, and writes as quickly as possible, and it's just chicken scratch. But I like the endearness of it. It makes it seem more legitimate,
Yeah, it's just like a rectangle over a circle, and then there's some really shitty writing. That's basically it.
Yeah.
And Ben really wants to remember this, so he stops in the middle of climbing in the vents. He looks at a piece of paper to remember what the fuck he was doing.
Yeah.
And then he continues climbing. It's great.
It is. The Cybermen arrive, and we get the exact same shot we did last time of the ship landing. And my question is, what happened to the other ship with the Cybermen that all got killed? Or is this just a ship that's like dropping off 5 people at a time and then doing back and forth trips?
It's just all off camera, just one ship. It's landing on its own. Mm-hmm. All the other ships just off camera.
Yeah, of course. That being said, it's some fun miniature work. Then we get the only real action of the episode, which is the Cybermen coming out in the snow and getting shot. You said that a guy's hat piece for the Cybermen fell off when he fell into the snow, which is very funny. But that being said, the snow stuff does look great, and the look specifically of these Cybermen in the snow is such a cool fucking visual. Like it's very horror-y, it's very creepy, it's wonderful.
Yeah, I almost wish there was more Cybermen in the snow stuff, like characters just running around in the snow.
The only Cybermen in this episode appear right now in this scene.
It's crazy, yeah. They weren't in the first episode, and they weren't really in this episode. So we're really only in 2 episodes. It's very strange.
Yeah. They're not very active villains. But when they're on screen, it is good. It's just they're not really given. It's interesting. They don't really have too much to do.
In this episode, especially in this story, they aren't really conceived as villains. They're just we want to survive and we want to destroy the planet.
It's just an accident of happenstance, really, isn't it?
Yeah, really, yeah.
We then get an extremely long take of Ben going through the vents where he's crawling. He stops, checks his map, make sure he knows where he's going. Oh yeah, the map said go straight on, and so he just keeps going through that vent. And then we cut to a wide shot on the outside of the lab that he's staring into, and it's fucking hilarious. This vent is like 6 foot wide, has got no like vent grates. It's just chicken like fucking fence. Like it's just a fence you'd put up when you've got chickens, and you can see Ben. You can just see him staring, like he's like crouched and he's looking in. Like it is hilarious to look at.
It's almost as if a scientist that Ben is watching is ignoring him deliberately, because there's no way he can't see him.
He just doesn't want him to feel awkward, so he's like, I'm just going to pretend I didn't see this and just leave the room. We then get a very strange scene where Polly's with the doctor and she's like, oh, I wish you'd wake up, even though we don't see the doctor, but don't worry, he's definitely there in bed sleeping. Then a guard's coming in and Polly's like, oh fuck, better hide. Climbs into the upper bunk, sneezes, and then gets under the covers. and the guard comes in.
Yeah.
She's like, "Oh, she's not there," and then he leaves, and that's the end of the scene. I don't understand why Polly sneezed. I was like, maybe it's a genuine sneeze, and they were just like, "Fuck it, we don't need more than one take of this." Like,
maybe part of it is to kind of build suspense. You hear somebody coming in, and Polly sneezes, and you think as an audience member, "Oh
she's
shit,
gonna
she
get
just
caught."
gave herself
Yeah.
away," and then. I think it's just a scene that just doesn't really capture
But
well.
like, even then, that being said, why is she hiding? Because she's in the room with the doctor. She's not anywhere she's not supposed to be. She's more than able to be in that room.
But Ben was supposed to. I don't know. That doesn't make sense either because I don't know. I don't know.
But Ben comes out of the vent. And he's at the rocket place, and he's like, "I don't know fucking anything about rockets. I guess I'm gonna stop it somehow." And he just starts fiddling with it as we see some soldiers collect the weapons from the snow. And then we get some more fucking radio talk briefly with the general and stuff, and he quickly figures out that there's something wrong when the head scientist guy isn't around. Goes up to him, he's like, "Hey, what's going on?" And the head scientist comes up with some shit excuse the general doesn't believe, and he immediately barges into the rocket room and just completely kills Ben. Throws him off of the bridge, and Ben smashes his head and shatters into a million little pieces.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure Ben falls head first. There's no way.
Well,
he
you
could
see
survive
him later with an ice pack on his head. Like he definitely fell head first. But after they fix that, they're like, "Okay, go back into the rocket and fix everything." And we've got somehow, right? Believe this, we have 4 minutes of this episode left. We have flown through this episode. It is insane how quickly we have gotten through this episode. And these next 4 minutes, oh boy, bet you nothing happens as we spend the entire time inside the launch room with the general checking diagnostics, making sure everything is okay, chatting with his son briefly. He's like, "Yo, son, are you okay?" Son's like, "Not really. Things are getting a bit bad up here. None of my things are working." And he's like, "Ah, shit, don't worry. We're going to launch these nukes." And then we make sure we check our technical systems are working. We check that our gravity systems are working. We check that our backup systems are working. Oh, but then wait, there's a fault in one of the systems. That stops us for about 30 seconds, and then we start checking them all again. It's a really methodical ending to this episode.
Yeah, the episode ends literally just counting down to the point where we could end the episode. It feels like this was supposed to be like a 3-parter, and Kip Heather was like, "I don't know what the fuck to do with part 4. Part 3, sorry. I guess we'll just count down to the end." And the Doctor was supposed to turn up at some point.
I don't know where the Doctor would
his...
fit in this bit of the episode at all.
He was supposed to make his miraculous return from being ill. I don't understand it.
Yeah,
it's
but
very strange.
The last 40 seconds are literally the launch is happening in 40 seconds, 30 seconds, 20 seconds. And these are actual full-on 10-second intervals as we're just looking at people. And then it goes 10, 9, and then the actual numbers appear up on the screen like it's New Year, which actually is a fun little graphic thing. It's the 1960s.
Yeah.
Like, this is actually like a cool little bit of TV innovation happening.
It was, yes.
Like,
exactly. That's what I was going to bring up. Yeah, it looks great. It works out well, but yeah.
Yeah, and then...
We're just literally Yeah, we get a shot of like the rocket just sitting there for 10 seconds doing nothing. It rises up, and then we watch it just sit there for like 10 seconds, and we're just sitting there. Nothing happens. The cliffhanger is just
the rocket launching.
Nothing.
The cliffhanger is just the rocket launches at 1, and then the episode ends.
And there's a 2-minute countdown.
Yeah.
It's so strange. The whole episode is just a countdown.
I'm honestly amazed we've gotten through this episode so quickly. I'm fucking stunned. Has it got to be the quickest we've ever gone through an episode? Because like nothing, there's literally, I don't think we've ever had, like we've had episodes where halfway through in Hand of Fear, the plot stops and we're just watching Sarah Jane walk around. We had more to talk about then than we did on this one.
Yeah, this episode is so strange. It's easily the worst episode of this 4-parter for sure.
Yeah, but
there's no doubt about it.
Like that being said, I still don't dislike this episode. Like there's like nothing. Yeah. Sure, nothing happens, and there's not really too much to talk about. But the 20 minutes flies by. Like there's never a bit where I'm like, oh, this is boring. This is a bit slow. I'm sucked in and engaged the entire time for some reason.
But for the last episode to survive of William Hartnell's era, it's such a shame. It's just a countdown. Imagine if this was the episode that was animated and we got part 4.
Yeah.
This episode feels like it should have been lost to time.
Yeah.
And nothing was missed.
Yeah, It's weird that this one survived and the other one didn't. Them's the breaks, I guess, to quote our favorite prime minister. But I guess we're done with this episode somehow.
Yeah.
We must have talked about this for like 10 minutes. Like, this is ridiculous how quick we got through that episode.
Crazy.
But let's just jump straight into the next episode. You know, part 4 has got a lot more going on. This is our first look at the animation for the animated revival stuff. It's, you know, Hartnell's last thing. Hartnell's got a lot of dialogue now suddenly in part 4, and it's quite a fun little episode. So let's jump straight into it. Away we go.
Yeah,
But he's ill.
he's gonna get worse. Get him up!
No need. Let him here.
Doctor, you all right?
Yes, yes, yes. Your plan is foiled, sir. You cannot fire the rocket.
Yes, and you've just arrived in time. Get over there.
I must protest.
Move! Dyson, get through to Zeus 5.
What happened to you, Doctor?
Oh, I'm not sure, my dear. Comes from an outside influence. Unless this old body of mine is wearing a bit thin.
What do you mean wearing a bit thin?
Oh, don't worry, child. Don't worry, don't worry.
So yes, this is obviously the missing episode of this story we're covering. When I was doing research in Doctor Who magazine, I was reading about somehow about this whole story being colorized, and I was like, holy shit, that's really interesting. In the 1980s, they were trying to colorize this, and then I kept on reading the Doctor Who magazine article, and it says, oh, episode 4 was 95% of it was uncovered, and it was basically found. And I was like, no way is this true. I guess somebody lied to Doctor Who magazine. And then I realised it was an April Fool's joke. I got fooled by an April Fool's joke from like 40 years ago, and I feel like an idiot. I feel like an utter idiot.
Oh, that's incredible. That is incredible. Yes.
So it appears that the BBC wanted to keep the entirety of the 10th Planet in their archive, but around 1974 they apparently decided to junk it. In 1992, a man under the name of Roger Barrett claimed that he found episode 4 and offered to sell to the BBC for £500. And the BBC planned a videotape release of this story and filmed an introduction for it with Michael Craze, who played Ben, saying that episode 4 had now been recovered. However, they scrapped this release when they discovered it to be a hoax. The story would eventually be released on video in 2000, and we just do like a photograph reconstruction of a storyline. It finally got animated in 2013 by Planet 55 Studios, which is owned by Big Finish. Of course, Big Finish. We all love Big Finish here.
Yeah.
And the regeneration scene of this episode is the only thing to exist from this episode. It was because Blue Peter aired the regeneration scene to celebrate Doctor Who's 10th anniversary in 1973. And it was believed for a long time, it was a myth for a long time, that it was because of Blue Peter this episode doesn't exist anymore, because they accidentally lost it, but it's a myth.
Yeah, it's shit that it's missing, for sure, out of all of them. I don't think I'm ever going to understand the BBC's mentality back then of, fuck it. Like, like, it's such a strange, especially because they were spending, you know, obviously not a lot of money, but still a significant amount of money. This is, you know, primetime TV sci-fi show. You know, as cheap as Doctor Who is, BBC doesn't have huge budgets back then, and they're still like, destroy it, fuck it, we'll just end this. I guess maybe archiving it costs more money, but...
Yeah, and around the early 70s, I would presume they would be hearing about, videotapes are going to change this whole way of distributing films and all that, but they just decided to junk them, which is a shame.
Yeah. Do you think it'll ever be found? Do you think that there's any remnants of it left? Some fucking weird dude who's somehow managed to get a hold of a few scraps of film, or had a really old video recorder and was like, I'm super into piracy in the 1960s and recorded his TV set? Like...
Well, I think the last time a Doctor Who episode was found was in like 2017. It was an episode or two of Galaxy 55, and then in 2013 we found about 9 missing episodes. So I would say never, but as time goes on, I think it's less and less likely.
Where do they find them? That's my question, you know.
Places like Nigeria, just in like private warehouses
just
and all that
deep
shit.
in the pyramids of Giza. There's a copy of episode 4 of the 10th Planet buried with the pharaohs.
But yeah, I could imagine we should go on a hunt for missing episodes, my dude. It'd be like Indiana Jones, and then we get money.
It'd be a really a interesting documentary. Like, if somebody was to
It
make a
would be.
documentary about it, it would remind me a lot. Did you ever see the documentary about the buried ET games?
No, I haven't.
Really, really good documentary about this huge conspiracy that was just like a rumor that ET was famously a really broken game. And like it didn't sell very well and it was like a piece of shit, but they printed so many copies because they expected it to be this huge success, but they just didn't sell. And then to cover up that fact, they just threw all the copies in a landfill and buried it. And the documentary is like talking about this and then trying to find out where it is, and then spoiler alert, they fucking find it. They find all these copies of the ET for the Atari buried in the desert, and they're like, holy shit. So imagine just somewhere out there in deep in the pyramids of Giza, we go in and we just start chipping around, and boom, there's every episode of Doctor Who on videotape. Like,
Yeah, I think there's a story of some guy called Philip Morris who's discovered some Doctor Who episodes, and there's stories of them being like war-torn countries, get in like bomb areas, just trying to find Doctor Who episodes and missing pieces of media in general. And it's like, yeah, it's such an interesting life to have.
yeah, it's also wild that it would end up in places like that. Yeah. Like, how many hands has it slipped through that it's ended up in a war-torn country in the other side of the world? Like,
Yeah, I mean, the 10th Planet was shown in countries like New Zealand, Australia, and Singapore, I believe. So yeah, I guess I don't know where we would have been shopping this episode around, but I guess one of those countries probably have the tapes, maybe.
Maybe, yeah. But I was going to say something. Yes, this is our first animated look, and you were saying that this was animated in 2013. I've never been a huge fan of the animated, the way the animated episodes look, because, they do look cheap. It's not expensive animation, it is cheap animation, but I'm glad that they exist because it allows us to watch episodes like this again, even though they are missing. What sucks is a few months ago, obviously, they stopped doing these animated ones now. They're no longer producing any more animated episodes, which makes me wonder what they're going to do to restore stories,
There's going to be some company someday it's going to be like, we're going to animate some Doctor Who episodes. It will happen because we took a break between the invasion in 2006 was the first episode to be animated, and then after that I think we took a break until around about 2012 2013, and this was like the first proper animation we did, and then we took another break around 2016 2017 and came back in like 2019 or something. So it goes in cycles. There's companies are interested in this, they go through funding and all that, and we're like, yeah, we're not going to do any more. I mean, another company does it. So I presume we're going to get all the episodes animated someday. Maybe not episodes like Marco Polo or the Daleks Master Plan, because those are like, we're going to have to animate like 8 parts for the Dalek Master Plan. It's insane.
Yeah,
but
I mean, if the budget was big enough, not that it ever will be, but...
Yeah, as far as the animation, I'm not a big fan of the animation myself, but it's the best way possible to see these episodes, at least for now, unless we find them. Yeah. Somehow, which is unlikely these days.
What's interesting is that obviously the film or the tape, is completely lost to time, but the audio recordings are completely okay.
Yeah. So what fans would do in like the 60s, we would just take their tape recorder, as in the audio tape recorder, and put them right next up to their TV, so they could relive Doctor Who adventures in audio form.
Big Finish before
so that's why
Big
all
Finish.
So that's why all these audios exist for every single episode. Usually in poor quality, but in cases like this, they just reworked the file. They've remastered the file so it sounds well enough so we can listen to them.
That's actually really cool. Anyway, I'm ready to dive into this episode if you are.
Hell yeah.
Let's jump in to part 4 of the 10th Planet. So this episode begins with the rocket launch failing. It does not launch as we all thought it would after all that preparation. It turns out that Ben's fucking around with the cables was enough to stop it, really making the last episode a huge waste of fucking time. Then the Doctor shows up and he, immediately is an injection of life into the story, surprisingly, considering it's Hartnell's performance. But like, Hartnell is actually fucking doing really well in this episode. It's so bad we can't see him. It's so sad. Like,
he is legitimately great in this episode.
Yeah.
You can tell you can tell he's still a bit ill, but he's really giving it all. He's really putting all his energy into his performance, which is what we haven't seen from Hartnell in quite some time in terms of his show's progression.
Yes.
No.
Yes. We also get the very famous line, "wearing a bit thin," when he's like, "Oh, I'm feeling maybe this body's wearing a bit thin," as he's talking about his illness and stuff like that, which is a line that has been repeated a couple times across Regenerations. Most famously, I think Matt Smith said it when he went to regenerate.
William Hartnell might even say that line in his biopic, An Adventure in Space and Time, I think.
It's a very famous line. And then he continues to just be like, "Hey, let's have a look at like what's going on here." And this is when the general is absolutely having none of it. He's like, "Absolutely, fuck off. Nobody is moving around anywhere. I'm going to shoot everybody." As he's chatting with his son across the radio. But eventually the son stops communicating. They lose contact with him, and that pushes the general over the edge where he's like, "I'm done. You know, the Cybermen are coming. They're coming here. I've lost contact with my son. We are launching those, we're going to fix this missile. I'm going to shoot you guys and just wrap this up." And the animation of the general waving his gun around is great. Like the specific drawings of his face, like wide eyes open, gun like right up in the close-up. It made me think that legit, like, Hartnell was gonna get shot. I was like, oh shit, like that's how he regenerates. He just gets capped, like. But alas, that does not happen, as the general gets zapped by the Cybermen's like flashlight gun thing that they carry around. And the animation for him with all the smoke coming out his chest and stuff was very cool as well. I'm sure it didn't look half as cool as it did in live action, but the animation makes up for it quite some bit.
Yeah, you can tell they're really trying to use their imagination and trying to capture what the show looks like, as well
capture
as
the feel,
inject,
like imagine looking at it through the eyes of somebody in 1960 whenever this episode aired, like what they probably did with the general is there was a bright light and maybe a bit of smoke came out of his chest, but the shot that we have, he's by himself, there's smoke everywhere, and he's like, "Ah!" as he's falling down, which, as if you were someone in the 60s telling your friend about it over coffee, that's how you would embellish it. You'd be like, "Oh yeah, you got fucking zapped and there was smoke everywhere, it was brutal." And I'm a big fan of the creative choices the animation takes.
Yeah, again, it's limited animation, but you can really tell you've got a talented group of people behind the scenes working on this animation. We're really giving it their all.
And then negotiations begin with the Cybermen and the Doctor, where it basically boils down to the Cybermen won't negotiate while there's a nuclear bomb aimed at their planet, which, fair enough. The Doctor's like, "Okay, I guess we could turn it off because we just kind of want to wait you out anyway, because if we stall negotiations for long enough, Mondas will just blow up because it's in like an awkward bit or there's something wrong with it or whatever the fucking jib jab they said." So they go like, "Okay, we'll turn off these missiles, we'll work with the Cybermen for now, and just do what they want from us, because I think that's our best plan, is to just go along with the Cybermen until it's suddenly in our benefit that we're Mondas is destroyed." And then the Cybermen are like, "We want Polly, as our insurance policy, to make sure you guys don't like double cross us and launch the missile or whatever." And Polly has no objections to this at all. Everybody talks for her. Like Ben steps in and he's like, "Oh, you can't take her." And then the Doctor's like, "What would you do with this little girl?" And and then he's just like, "Polly, you're going with them." And then it cuts to a different scene. She does not have a say in fucking anything. She has no agency.
Yeah, it's such a shame, because Ben really shows his true character in these two episodes.
Yeah, Ben's fucking ace. Yeah, Ben's great in these two episodes. He's so good. Yeah.
And even the Doctor is at his, well, not his best here, but he's at Hartnell's best here.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, Polly just falls under the trope of, she's a damsel in distress, and that's all she's really there for. She makes coffee and she gets kidnapped. That's her whole shtick.
Yeah. We then get some very cool shots of the Cyberman taking Polly to like a restraint place, or like just a place to lock her up. They took huge creative license. Perhaps there wasn't many still images of the scene, and they were like, fuck it, we'll just kind of like draw it, because there's some awesome silhouettes and some great close-ups. But basically the Cyberman knocks out Polly, ties her up, and then sticks her in to this like little prison bit. I don't know why she needed to be knocked out. She wasn't saying any words to begin. It's not like she was a loud prisoner. Like, she has no objections to being here.
Yeah, it's just she just wanted to be like Hartnell in the last episode and just sleep the episode off.
Yeah. We then get Hartnell talking through the penis phone to Captain Europe. It looks even more like a penis in animation than it does in real life. It's very funny. This scene is also hilarious because Captain Europe, there's like a Cyberman that shows up, and he's like, oh, well, who are you then? And then the Cyberman's like, I'm in charge of Earth now.
And there's a really fast pan out of the scene to just reveal the Cyberman standing there in full brightness.
It's very funny. We then cut to, it's hard to make out who they're supposed to be through the suits and through the animation, but I think it's Ben and a couple of the scientists. I'm not exactly sure. I think Ben's there. And they're in the radiation room with the Z-bomb, and they're like, why are we dismantling this right now? Because the Cybermen aren't in here with us. They're looking at us through that window. I think that they're like, susceptible to radiation. And Ben tests it by calling for help and opening the door, and the Cyberman takes a step in and gets all fucking wobbly, and then Ben kicks out and closes the door again. He's like, we're fucking safe in here, we don't need to do anything. And that, it's very clever thinking on Ben's part. I'm really liking Ben as a companion.
I don't remember Ben being this good. He's taking initiative. He's a
man of action.
And you can tell in this scene specifically, they took shortcuts in terms of lip syncing by, they're in their boiler suits, and you only see the reflection of what's going on around them. It's not even a reflection.
It's just like white light. Like occasionally it'll cut to a close up and you can see their mouth, but more often it's that wide shot where you can't really see their faces. But it still works.
Yeah, I mean, you don't really need to see those faces for the scene to be effective. It works either way. It works fine.
Yeah. And this is where Ben discovers the one flaw in his plan of not doing anything is that the Cybermen still have the Doctor and Polly and will probably just kill them. So they need to think of a solution of getting them away from the Cybermen. Meanwhile, the Doctor's back in the room, and the Cyberman's like, by the way, we're going to destroy everything. He's like, Mondas and Earth can't exist at the same time because Mondas is on a path of destruction. We're going to destroy Earth, but since you guys are like kind of cool, you can come up to Mondas and we'll just have like a super chill time on Mondas and it'll be super rad. Why don't the Cybermen all come to Earth? It's not like a dangerous planet where they all need to turn into Cybermen to live, like Mondas is. They could just all move to Earth and then let Mondas get destroyed, since the Cybermen are like friendly.
I mean, if they move to Earth, they'll get a load of resistance from Earth.
I guess, but they could just live on Antarctica. Nobody lives on that continent. It's inhospitable, except the Cybermen seem pretty chill with it. Why not just have that continent for the Cybermen?
That sounds too much like the Sea Devils might do.
The Sea Devils don't live in Antarctica. They just live in the ocean.
No, I know, but the whole idea of why don't you just stay inside of the ocean and because nobody else lives there.
Yeah, I know, but it's a solution, isn't it?
Yeah, it is a solution,
the other solution is genocide, which everyone seems to be pretty chill with, just letting this planet blow up.
But again, it adds to the tragedy of a Cyberman. All they want to do is to survive, and you can kind of relate to that, even though they're kind of like morbidly grotesque in terms of how they're surviving.
Yes. So the episode continues, and we get the Doctor is imprisoned now with Polly. He's just kind of in the same place she is. Don't worry about it. It happened off screen, I guess. And this is the only scene we see of them until the end of the episode, where Polly's like, I'm scared, Doctor. And he's like, all right.
I wonder if the first half got rewritten during the week Hartnell was off, to be like, okay, William Hartnell wasn't in the last episode. Should we give him a big
like a
scene?
huge speech to do? Yeah.
And then just let him rest for the rest of the episode.
Yeah, because then
it feels like they did well.
Yeah,
for a
because then
reason.
Ben takes over again and starts, being the Doctor again, and coming up with all the plans and shouting at people and stuff. Because that's what we move into next. For these next 10 minutes of the episodes, it's really following Ben and the scientists as Ben is shouting with them, arguing, trying to figure out, like, how are they going to fight the Cybermen, how are they going to beat this. Eventually they discover that there are these, like, radiation rods, basically, these nuclear rods or whatever that are powering the facility. If they take them out, they can use them to make the Cybermen all jizz, which is what it sounds like when they're killing the Cybermen. They're like, ah, oh.
It's great.
Yeah, they move out and they start attacking the Cybermen, and we get, I guess this is what you would call as our big action set piece for the big finale. The Cybermen start trying to gas them and kill them with gas, but they manage to, I guess, just withstand that gas and take out the Cybermen with the radiation rods, which to me just looks like the things from The Simpsons that Homer gets stuffed down the back of his back. But they eventually take control of the facility again. Then the power goes out and they're like, oh shit, what are we going to do? Boom, emergency power kicks in, and oh my god, there's even more Cybermen standing there with their guns at the ready. How are our heroes going to get out with this one? Surely they're doomed. No, because now Mondas explodes. The end. Basically, Mondas explodes and all the Cybermen magically disintegrate because they were connected to Mondas in some way, which... we were saying this off screen. Literally, the solution to the problem in this episode is wait. Yep. Just fucking wait. If we just sit around and do nothing, Mondas will explode and the Cybermen will all die. Which is what happens. Like, even if they didn't go around trying to escape the base and the Cybermen just killed them, like the Cybermen were like, fuck you, we're gonna kill you, they would still lose because they don't have enough time to, evacuate a whole planet or do what they want, and the second Mondas dies, they get destroyed. So like the plan doesn't super make sense, but Mondas dies and the animation of the Cybermen disintegrating looks cool. I don't get why they disintegrate. I don't understand what causes their organic material to disintegrate and their non-organic material to stay behind, but I guess they were Mondas after all. The real Mondas was inside all of us.
But yeah, this is the second episode in a row where basically the climax is, we're just gonna wait, because obviously the last episode was, we're just gonna wait for the rocket to launch. I mean, the rocket doesn't launch. We're gonna wait for the planet to be destroyed. The planet is destroyed. We're all good now. It's all fine.
Yeah.
It's as far as plot, it's very simple. It's very basic, and it's just.
It is
not
but
active.
It's weird how much I'm still like get sucked into it. Like there's really nothing going. This episode just has a vibe. Like the vibe of this episode's just kind of nice to sit in, isn't it? But this is also where we discover that old Capitan's son is alive. Actually, as radio contact comes back, and he's like, "Oh my god, I'm alive, and I think I'm descending back on Earth." And the guys are like, "Awesome, that's cool. Your dad's dead." But basically, this is, we're finding out that everything is okay. Ben goes to go save Polly, he saves her, and then we find the doctor's passed out. And he's like, oh, fuck, shit, the doctor passed out. And we find out that he passed out when the lights went off. They wake him up, and he gives a very good wee speech, doesn't he, Scott?
Yeah, he says, Ben says it's all over now. And then the doctor's like, it's far from being all over, which is so iconic, and it's actually really good for, because Doctor Who is far from being all over.
Yes.
It's still here, like almost 60 years on.
Yes.
It's such a great line for that reason. It's like we predicted the future of Doctor Who. It's far from being all over.
It's also
great.
It's also, I think, a really good one of the last lines. If not, I think it could be the last line Hartnell says. To carry the show over for the next era with Patrick Troughton, because yes, I'm leaving the show, but the story of Doctor Who is far from over. It's kind of the opposite of I don't want to go. Like.
Yeah, I think his original lines was, as he's regenerating, he's like, no, I mustn't die or whatever, which is very like, I don't want to go. Basically, is what he's basically saying there. But they decided the scene worked better without any lines. So one of his final lines is, "It's basically far from not being all over."
Yeah. It's a good.
The show isn't over yet, folks.
It's a good line to lead into the next Doctor for sure.
And then, of course, after William Hartnell leaves the room and then goes off on an adventure with Peter Capaldi. It's great.
It is.
I mean, suddenly he becomes very sexist, and
I don't know. Watching this episode, it's not that sudden, is it?
Was the Doctor sexist in this episode? Did he threaten to spank Polly on the bottom? Did he?
Well, to be fair, he didn't let her talk and just kind of gave her up and then went bye. He was like, "You're the useless chick, bye." But to be fair, for William Hartnell to be sexist, he'd have to do something on set other than sleep.
Yeah, true.
But the Doctor goes into the TARDIS. Polly and Ben are banging on the outside, and then inexplicably they just are allowed in at a certain point. And they find William Hartnell collapsed on the floor of the TARDIS. As we zoom into his face, and the TARDIS starts whirring as it does, light starts protruding, and we see him regenerate into Patrick Troughton, the second Doctor. It's all done without words. It's done really without music as well. It's just the noise of the TARDIS fucking moving, and it's great. It's such a cool... it would have fucking absolutely blown my mind as a kid watching this on TV. Absolutely would have blown my mind.
Imagine missing this episode, Phil, and then suddenly you're watching next to this episode, and you're like,
"Who the fuck is this?" Yeah. Although I think it would have been all over the papers. It would have been in the news. It would have been big fucking event when it happened. It'd be impossible to be out the loop.
Remember, Doctor Who wasn't that big. If you remember, this, I think this episode was 47th for the week.
Yeah,
it was broadcast. And this is back in the 60s when there was only 10 shows on TV. So it's pretty impressive we managed to get 47th.
Yeah.
But when William Hartnell was announced to leave the show, it's basically on page 19 of newspapers, which kids wouldn't read it, so they would have been out of the loop, basically.
Interesting.
So it would have been a big shock for them.
Yeah, it would have been. But yeah, and that brings us to the end of this episode. Somehow already, I feel like this is going to be a very short episode.
But we can talk more about Regeneration. Hartnell would say many things about leaving Doctor Who. He would sometimes say he was forced out of the role, and other times he would say he disliked the direction the series was going and wanted to return to stage instead. The Christmas after this episode aired, he went on to pantomime and did Puss in the Boots.
Oh, that would have been fun.
There's actually a fun behind-the-scenes video of him being interviewed as he's doing the pantomime, and he's talking about his time on Doctor Who. It's very sweet. The basic premise of this Regeneration was the Doctor should be shown to die and then come back as a younger man, which is something that changed in later years because obviously Matt Smith to Peter Capaldi, he's grown older. So the whole thing about regeneration in this concept is he's just getting younger and healthier, which is something that we didn't keep with in the show. And also, the TARDIS does regeneration rather than the Doctor doing the regeneration, because at this point they weren't sure if he was alien or not. He was still considered to be a human from the 51st century or whatever, and the TARDIS did the regeneration for him.
Which is why he's so desperate to get back into the TARDIS. To regenerate. Interesting.
And according to Jerry Davis, the regeneration scene was inspired from Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and we first assumed that showing the regeneration on screen would be impossible. The first idea would just to have Hartnell simply collapse on the floor with his cloak covering his face, and then in next week's episode the cloak would be lifted to reveal Patrick Troughton. They soon discovered that they could use an effect and got Troughton to sign an additional contract to appear at the end of this episode. Which is really interesting because I could imagine it being a cliffhanger and you're not.
Yeah, I could absolutely see them just doing it in the cloak because that is honestly it's the easiest and most cost efficient way of doing it. He collapses in the cloak. You're left wondering, oh my god, is he going to be okay? Next week, holy shit, this is a different dude. What the fuck? And then he can spend the first half of the episode being like, well, you see, I am a TARDIS man.
Shirley Coward was in charge of the vision mixing of this regeneration. She said that she only knew she was in charge of regeneration when she showed up on set that day. No one had a clue how they were going to do it. The sequence was the first to be shot for the day, which was unusual for Doctor Who to shoot out of order, and it took a whole day to film, with Patrick and Hartnell lying at different sides of the studio, with the camera pointed at both men, and Shirley Coward would begin to fade between the two. However, they discovered a fault with the machines they were using that would result in a weird, distorted image when fading in between the two men, and Shirley Coward experimented with this to create the first ever Regeneration scene. So that's why we get like the distorted kind of view on the Regeneration. So yeah, basically broken technology helped Regeneration.
That's really cool. Yeah.
Hartnell famously said Troughton was the only man in England who could succeed them. And Patrick was initially reluctant to play the Doctor. He thought the show would be over soon, as 3 years was a lot of time for a TV series. Like you can imagine a show lasting more than 3 years, and 60 years later we're still talking about Doctor Who. And we could have very nearly seen the Doctor in blackface. Patrick had an idea to paint his face and wear a turban as his Doctor to avoid future typecasting.
Oofed.
And I am so glad we didn't do that.
Yeah, that would have really made his era like a black mark in Doctor Who history.
Yeah.
Like it would be like an era we don't talk about. Would be his era.
I think
Whereas instead, now it's
could
talked
have-
about with such like Patrick Troughton. We've covered a few of his episodes. He's great as the Doctor. Yeah,
we covered Tomb of the Cybermen, which is basically almost a sequel to this episode.
Yes.
But yeah, blackface second Doctor would have killed the show in my opinion.
Yeah. I don't think it would have come back. I don't think they would have rebooted it. Like, yeah.
But yeah, the Regeneration itself, I've seen the actual footage of the Regeneration. It looks great. It looks solid.
I think
it looks simple enough.
I think I've
but
seen it as
looks
well.
good.
I think I must have seen it as I have images of it in my head. Like I would have watched it as a kid, like looking up like Doctor Who Regenerations. But yeah, it does. It looks good. Animation wise, it's a bit difficult to tell when it becomes Patrick Troughton, and when it stops being William Hartnell, but you still get the same vibe.
Yeah.
I almost wish
Because-
that they just stuck in the live footage for that Regeneration, at the end of the episode.
Yeah, that would have been sick, because it is a bonus feature on the DVD, but they basically lined up both men's cheekbones to get, because they found out they both had similar cheekbones, so they managed to line that up in the camera just to get the perfect Regeneration.
Nice.
And yeah, just imagine them in the 60s trying to get this to work, whereas nowadays we could easily just do it on our mobile phones.
Nowadays, they don't even shoot them in the same room. They don't they were saying when they shot Jodie's Regeneration, it was months before they even cast Jodie. Like they still hadn't shot the other half of that Regeneration scene. They didn't know who it was going to be. Like now there's so fucking special effectsy that they could just be like, we'll fix it later. Like
Yeah, it's crazy. It's crazy how far time has gone. And it's crazy to think this is still the same show, because we're watching a different era of TV completely. It's insane.
Yeah, it really is. It's truly remarkable, isn't it? But we are not done with Regenerations, are we, Scott? Because next week is
Hell no.
something extremely special.
Or the week after, because we're doing it the week after. Next week we're doing the Ninth Doctor box set.
Well, that's still super special, but then the week after that we're doing the Centenary episode, because Regeneration is in the air. Jodie is leaving. The trailers come. All that's left now is to wait. And hope that Dan is okay.
To wait like the characters at the end of part 3.
Yes, but just wait it out. Just wait it out. Yeah. But in the meantime, while you're waiting for that, next week, what did you say it was, Scott? Just
next week we're doing the most recent Ninth Doctor audio box set, which I can't remember what the fuck it's called, so we'll leave it at that.
Cool. That sounds great. You should listen to that one. The Big Finish Ninth Doctor box sets have been pretty solid so far. We will be very famously, it's what we started the podcast on, is the Big Finish episodes with Christopher Eccleston. So it'll be nice to see how he's going in his fifth box set.
This must be his 7th.
7th? Fuck off.
No, wait. Yeah. No.
6th. Jesus. He's done.
I lost track.
He's done so many already. It's insane. But until then, you can find us on Facebook at Who Watches Who, on Twitter at Watches Doctor, on YouTube at Who Watches Who, where the podcast is available in video form. Hello. It is also available in audio form wherever you listen to podcasts. There's a bunch of links in the description. Fucking click all of them. I don't care. You can also send us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com with all of your Doctor Who questions and queries. Have you seen the first Doctor's Regeneration? Are you a super old person who watched it live?
Yeah, were you very live?
Yeah.
Because I imagine that experience must have been wild.
Yeah,
to
I would
remember,
love to hear the experience of somebody who watched it live. You can leave a comment on the YouTube video. You can send us a message on Facebook, leave a comment on Facebook, send us an email at whowatcheswhopod@gmail.com. Communicate with us in any way. I will find it and we will talk about it at the end of the month in our monthly news roundup podcast. Until then, you can find me on Twitter at Cloth223 and on Twitch at something orange, where we are currently playing through Psychonauts and talking about Doctor Who occasionally. It's a fun time. I'm a bit inconsistent with streaming at the moment because life is fucking insane, but I'm trying to get back into more of a regular schedule with that. Give me a follow. It's a good time. We'll hang out. But until then, we will see you next week. Bye.
Bye.